To understand what's new with the world of business associates, we need to know that the government issued almost 600 pages of new requirements in late January of 2013. And a lot of those pages dealt with your business associates. People like myself, people that are not physicians or medical practices, but assist medical practices. And in offering that assistance, they have access to patient information. These are transcription services, billing services, collection agency, and even lawyers like me. So what is new with a business associate? Well, all of the rules and regulations that apply to physician practices now apply to business associates. I can be audited just the same as your practice can be. And all of the penalties that the government can impose on you, they can now impose upon me as your business associate. And that's a major sea change in government regulation since January of this year. Okay, I'll tell you right off the bat, we need to be careful with marketing. This is a high area of intensity for the Office of Civil Rights. And when I say Office of Civil Rights, in your mind should come up the thought, HIPAA police. These are the guys that carry badges and enforce the federal law. So what you need to do when marketing, if you're going to make any effort to promote a third party's service or good, you need to have your patient's written permission up front. Even with that, I caution you, this is an area of high scrutiny. Be careful if you start down this path. All right, so the question right off the bat is about selling patient information, which should throw red flags up to everyone. This is an area of concern. Is it possible? Yes. Under the new rules, given the right circumstances, patient's written approval in advance, you can sell information that would be or could be beneficial to your patients. Again, the nuances of how you do this are very important, and you must be very, very careful because this is high on the Office of Civil Rights radar screen for enforcement. Patient privacy notices. These are those documents that you have to hand out to every patient that comes into your practice, and not a single one of your patients will ever read. Nonetheless, it is important to have the right language. And these documents that have been around for quite some time, for years in fact, now have to be modified under the new omnibus final rules that came out earlier in 2013. One of the things that you want to make sure of is that patients know that they have the right to privately pay for services, and if they pay out of pocket, that information does not get released to their insurance companies. Patients can, and that's what we were just discussing. They can, if they want to pay out of pocket, require your practice to keep parts of their medical history confidential from their insurance carrier. If they pay for it all out of their own pocket, then their insurance company does not have the right to that information. Unfortunately, this creates a shadow chart, really two separate charts, the one that you can share with their insurance company and the one that you cannot. I think that there are lots of practical problems and considerations with doing that, but it's the law. Like the old joke says, if you have to ask, you can't afford it. 1.5 million is the upper level per year per violation, but very rarely do I see a single violation. Government went out and did some auditing last year, 2012, and what they found was that only about 11% of the entities that they checked on were compliant, and most of the entities had multiple violations. Now, this doesn't mean that everybody's being hit with a multiple of 1.5 million, but it does mean that 1.5 million is not the ultimate cap. Be careful, they can charge and charge and charge. The definition of a breach, and that's the release of patient information or potential release of patient confidential information has been turned on its head. Before January of this year, the idea was that if you thought there had been a substantial risk of harm to a patient, we would call that a breach, and you would begin down the path of all your legal obligations. Now the assumption has changed. The assumption now is that there has been a breach, and it's your burden to prove that information has not been released or that it is kept confidential. So before it was assumed no problem unless you have reason to believe there's a problem. Now we're going to start with the polar opposite. We're going to assume that there's a problem, and you have to try to work your way out of it from there. So big change, and what that means on a practical standpoint is you need to update your data breach policies to have the new language and the new rules in them, and you need to be aware of this change in definition as you move forward. Because remember, it's your legal obligation. If there's a breach, it must be reported.